A poor waitress agrees to become the Vampire King's fake bride for just one night in exchange for money. But when he sees her innocence and courage, he offers to make her his real queen. What starts as a fake wedding act turns into a decision of true love, power, and destiny. Poor waitress agrees to be Vampire King's fake bride for one night. He asks her to be his real queen. They say some nights split your life in two, the person you were before and the stranger you wake up as after. This is the story of how a tired, invisible waitress walked into a haunted palace for one night's lie and walked straight into the heart of a lonely king who was never meant to love. The rain had already soaked through Alina's thin shoes by the time she reached the last bus stop at the edge of the old district. Her hand smelled faintly of coffee and dish soap, the smell of a double shift that still wasn't enough to pay the rent. The city lights faded behind her into a blur of gold and gray, and ahead of her, above the fog, rose the black silhouette of the ancient hilltop palace, its spires like frozen flames against the thunderclouds. People in the diner whispered about that place. The Vampire King's castle, cursed, dangerous, off limits. But people in the diner also whispered about tips that never came and landlords that didn't care, and right now, the only voice she could hear clearly was the memory of her little brother's cough and the hospital bill crumpled in her pocket. The stranger had come into the diner just before closing. A tall man in an old-fashioned black coat, his eyes the color of storm clouds caught in moonlight. He had watched her move from table to table, face tired but polite, voice soft yet steady even when customers snapped. When she brought his coffee, he had said her name like he already knew it. Alina. No one ever read her name tag. It startled her so much she almost dropped the cup. Then his offer, spoken in a calm, impossible voice, one night, pretend to be my bride at the palace. A large sum of money, more than she made in months, transferred immediately to her account. No harm, no binding promise, just one night of pretending. She had laughed at first, thinking it was some strange joke, but then he had slid a folded paper across the counter, hospital fees, exact amount. And her phone had buzzed with a notification, balance updated. Now, walking up the long stone path, Alina felt that same mix of disbelief and fear twisting in her chest. The air grew colder with every step, but it was not an ordinary cold. It felt like walking into a memory, into a forgotten winter that never ended. Mist clung to the ground, curling around her ankles like shy, curious ghosts. Above her, the palace windows glowed with a soft amber light, flickering like hundreds of candles. She tried to calm herself by repeating the rules he had told her. Stand by my side, smile when they look, say little, trust me. One night, that's all. The huge iron doors opened before she could reach for them. They moved in complete silence as if the hinges had never known rust. A tall figure stood in the doorway, framed by warm candlelight that spilled out into the fog. The same man from the diner, but somehow different. His dark coat had been replaced by a deep crimson cloak lined with black velvet, a thin golden crown resting on his pale hair. The shadows around him seemed to move with him, folding back respectfully as he stepped forward. Alina, he said again, her name softer now like a promise. You came. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, all of her fear stumbled. There was power in his gaze, yes, something ancient and unreadable, but behind it there was something she never expected to find in someone like him, a quiet, almost human tiredness. The kind you only see in people who have watched too many things fall apart. I said I would, she answered, hugging her worn jacket tighter around herself. I don't break promises, especially not when hospitals are involved. A brief, surprised curve touched his lips, almost a smile, but it faded as quickly as it appeared. He stepped aside and held out a hand, not like a master claiming a servant, but like a host inviting a guest into his home. His fingers were cold when she took them, but not dead cold, just winter cold, like the first touch of snow. Tonight, he said, leading her into a vast hall lined with tall candelabras, you are not a waitress, you are my bride. For a few hours, no one will look at you with pity or impatience. They will bow. Alina swallowed hard, her footsteps echoing on polished stone. The ceiling arched high above her like the inside of a cathedral, painted with faded constellations and scenes of battles she didn't recognize. Portraits of past kings and queens watched silently from the walls, their eyes following her in a way that sent a chill up her spine. Yet the warmth of the candles, The faint smell of old books and roses, and the soft rustle of distant fabrics made the place feel less like a monster's lair and more like a forgotten, lonely museum. "How many people are coming?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Enough to make the lie believable," he said. "The old houses, the council, those who still cling to their fears and traditions, they believe their king must marry tonight to keep the peace." He hesitated, a shadow crossing his features. "They also believe I am incapable of choosing someone kind." She glanced up at him, surprised. "Then why choose me? You don't even know me." He stopped near the base of a grand staircase, where a dress waited on a stand, golden fabric catching the candlelight like liquid dawn. It looked too beautiful to touch, too expensive for someone who counted every coin before buying bread. "I watched you at the diner," he said quietly, turning to face her fully. "The way you thanked the cook after every plate, the way you apologized when others were rude, even when it was not your fault. You were exhausted, yet you smiled at the old woman who could barely pay her bill. You cut her meal in half and told her it was on special just so she wouldn't feel ashamed. That is not nothing, Alina." Her throat tightened. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed those small moments, the little ways she fought the world's cruelty with simple, stubborn kindness. No one ever noticed. They just left tips or didn't and walked away. "Oh, you saw all that," she whispered. "I see more than most," he said. "It is a curse, but sometimes it allows me to recognize something rare when it passes before me." His gaze held hers, steady now. "I needed someone who could pretend to love a monster without truly hating him, even if only for a night." Something in his voice when he said the word monster made Alina's heart pull in an unexpected way. It wasn't pride, it wasn't threat, it was resignation. Like a child repeating a name he's been called too many times to fight. "I don't think you're a monster," she said before she could stop herself. "You paid my brother's hospital bill. Monsters don't do that." He looked away, a flicker of pain crossing his face so fast she almost missed it. "I did not do it to be kind," he murmured. "I did it because I needed you here." "And you chose to help instead of threaten," she replied softly. "That counts." For a moment the hall fell quiet except for the soft hiss of candles. The Vampire King, she still didn't know his name, only his title, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not in fear, but in the strange awareness of being truly, deeply seen. "You are different," he finally said. "Most who stand before me shake or flatter or lie, you argue, you defend me to myself." His eyes dropped to her cheap, damp jacket, her worn jeans, her shoes with the peeling soles. "And yet you came knowing what I am." "I came because I'm scared of losing my brother more than I'm scared of you," Alina answered honestly. Then, after a breath, she added, "And because something in your eyes told me you were lonelier than dangerous." Silence again, but this time it felt like the air between them had shifted, softer but heavier with meaning. He lifted his hand slightly, then let it fall as if fighting an instinct. "My name is Adrian," he said at last, as though giving away a secret rather than a simple fact. "You may call me that when we are alone. In front of others, you call me my king, and they will call you my queen, even if only for a few hours." The word queen landed in her chest like something fragile and ridiculous, yet oddly painful. All her life she had been hey, you, and girl and waitress. Queen was a word from other people's stories, other people's bloodlines. He gestured toward the golden dress. "Will you allow my attendants to help you change? Once you wear this, there is no turning back until the night is over." She stepped closer to the dress, reaching out with trembling fingers. The fabric was softer than anything she had ever touched, cool and smooth like water over river stones. For a second, she imagined herself in it, imagined walking beside Adrian under all these watchful eyes, imagined pretending that she belonged in a place like this. "Elena," his voice came, softer now, almost gentle. "You still have a choice. If you leave now, the money is still yours. The lie never starts. You go back to your life and I find someone else." Her hand froze on the gown. The thought of walking away, of returning to sticky floors and broken coffee machines, of watching her brother sleep in a hospital bed while she counted coins, that future was safe, familiar, and small. But now next to it stood another path, dangerous, strange, and filled with a kind of possibility she couldn't name yet. Slowly, she turned back to Adrian. The loneliness in his eyes was clearer now, like a reflection in dark water finally catching the light. For just a heartbeat, he did not look like a king or a vampire or a legend. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to hope. "You really would let me go?" she asked quietly, "even after all this?" "Yes," he said, and she believed him. There was no anger in his voice, only a tired sadness. "I will not trap someone who already lives in a cage." Her chest ached. No one had ever spoken about her life like that, as if they could see the invisible bars she woke up behind every day. The candles flickered. Somewhere deep in the palace, a bell chimed the hour. The night of the king's wedding, fake or not, was beginning, and with it, a choice that would change both of their lives. Alina looked at the dress, then at Adrian, at the outstretched road of this impossible lie, and the quiet, wounded dignity of the man asking her to walk it with him. Her throat tightened, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears as her fingers curled more firmly into the golden fabric. When she finally opened her mouth to speak, to say yes or no, to accept or refuse, to step into a story that was never meant for someone like her, the palace doors behind them slammed shut with a sudden, echoing boom, and a cold wind rushed through the hall, snuffing half the candles in an instant. From the dark end of the corridor, a voice layered with hatred and fear rose up, sharp and clear. "So it's true, the Vampire King has chosen a human girl for his bride." Alina froze, her answer trapped in her throat, as Adrian's entire body tensed and his eyes shifted not to hunger, but to something far more dangerous. Protective fury. They say some truths arrive like thunder, loud, sudden, and impossible to ignore. The moment the palace doors slammed and that bitter voice echoed through the hall, Alina understood that this night was never going to be a simple lie. It was a storm she had just stepped into, and somewhere at the eye of it stood a king who suddenly looked far more human in his fear than in his power. Adrian moved before she could even turn toward the sound. One second he was beside her, the next he was half a step in front, his cloak shifting like a living shadow, blocking her from view. His hand lifted slightly, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the chill of his skin, a quiet protective barrier between her and whoever had spoken. The half-extinguished candles struggled against a gust of cold air, their flames bending low as if bowing to tension. From the far end of the corridor, three figures approached. Their footsteps rang sharply on the stone, confident and unhurried. The man in front wore a dark green coat embroidered with silver, his hair slicked back, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone who believed they had caught their enemy off guard. Two others flanked him, dressed more simply but carrying themselves with equal arrogance. "Lord Cashin," Adrian said, his voice turning colder than the wind, "I don't recall inviting you before the council bell." Cashin gave a shallow, mocking bow, his gaze flicking past Adrian, trying to catch a glimpse of Alina. "Forgive me, my king, I was merely curious. You know how the old houses love their rumors. The Vampire King will take a bride tonight, they say. He will bind the old pacts with new blood." But no one mentioned that the bride would be, he tipped his head slightly, smirking, "so ordinary." Alina felt heat rise in her cheeks, humiliation mixing with anger. She didn't step out from behind Adrian, but she straightened, shoulders back. All her life, people had called her ordinary, invisible, unimportant. Usually she swallowed it. Tonight, the word tasted different, uglier, more cruel, spoken in this hall of marble and gold. Adrian didn't move aside. "You speak out of turn," he said quietly, and the air seemed to tighten around his words. "You will address my bride with the respect owed to a future queen." The word queen landed again between them, sharp and impossible to ignore. Cashin's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of contempt. "Future queen," Cashin repeated, laughing under his breath. "My king, with all due respect, the council will never accept a human at your side. She bleeds, she ages, she dies. She brings no powerful bloodline, no alliances, no advantage. Unless," his eyes gleamed, "unless you plan to turn her, make her like us, is that it? Is she tonight's ceremony?" Alina's stomach twisted. She had understood she would be pretending, standing by the king's side like a prop in a play. But the word turn hit her like a physical blow. No one had said anything about that. She glanced up at Adrian, searching his face for truth or denial, her pulse drumming fast. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You know the laws," he said. "No one is turned without their consent." "Ah," Cashin replied smoothly. "And would she consent, I wonder? Does she even know what you are capable of, my king? Or did you buy her silence like you buy everything else, with money and pretty gowns?" That did it. Alina stepped out from behind Adrian before fear could stop her. Her heart thudded against her ribs, but she lifted her chin, meeting Cashin's gaze directly. His eyes flashed with interest, like a cat discovering that the mouse had teeth. "I'm right here," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. "You don't have to talk about me like I'm a piece of furniture." Cashin's brows rose. "Bold," he murmured, "for someone so fragile." "Fragile doesn't mean worthless," she shot back. "And if you're so powerful, why are you so afraid of ordinary people like me?" Adrian's eyes flicked to her in surprise, a brief spark of admiration cutting through his anger. Cashin's expression cooled. "I am not afraid of you, girl," he said. "I am concerned for my king, for our kingdom. The balance we have maintained for centuries is delicate. Humans fear us enough as it is, and now he parades one of them as his bride, a waitress in a queen's dress. Tell me, does that not sound like mockery for both sides?" Waitress, the word landed like an old bruise being pressed. Alina clenched her hands at her sides. Part of her wanted to shrink, to disappear back into the safety of smallness. But another part, the same part that had stayed late to help her sick coworker, that had quietly paid for strangers' coffee when their cards declined, refused to bend. "I might be a waitress," she said quietly, "but at least I earn what I have. Can you say the same?" The two figures beside Cashin stiffened, but Adrian spoke before they could react. "That is enough," he commanded, the weight of his authority crashing down like a dropped curtain. "Lord Cashin, you will leave now. You will return when the council bell rings, as tradition demands. If you choose to stay and insult my bride, you insult your king, and that is a mistake you cannot afford." For a moment, no one moved. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Cashin studied Adrian with narrowed eyes, then Alina, something cold and calculating turning behind his gaze. Finally, he inclined his head in a shallow nod. "As you wish, my king," he said. "I will go, but understand this, the council is not blind, nor are they forgiving. Tonight, every move you make will be remembered for centuries. Choose carefully whose hand you hold when the vows are spoken." He turned on his heel, his cloak flaring, and walked away with his attendants, their steps echoing down the corridor until the sound dissolved back into the uneasy silence of the hall. Only then did Alina realize how hard she was breathing. Adrian turned to her slowly, the tension in his shoulders still visible. "You should not have stepped forward," he said, but his tone held more worry than anger. "Cashin plays with words like knives. He looks for weakness anywhere he can find it." "Then maybe don't let him see mine," she replied, still catching her breath. "I don't like being hidden like I'm something to be ashamed of." He blinked as if the idea genuinely surprised him. "I was not ashamed," he said. "I was trying to protect you." She met his eyes, seeing the conflict there, centuries of strategy and caution, crashing against a sudden, unfamiliar need to shield one person specifically. "Protection is good," she said softly, "but you can't protect someone and erase them at the same time." For a moment, the king of a hidden world looked almost uncertain. Then he nodded once, slowly, accepting the truth in her words. "You are right," he admitted quietly. "I have grown used to shadows, to hiding what I cannot control. You are not a secret, Alina. I chose you knowing the risk." His eyes darkened. "I did not, however, choose for you to be turned. That is not why you are here." Relief washed through her so sharply she had to grab the edge of the dress stand to stay steady. "So all that talk about turning," she began. "Was Cashin pushing old fears?" Adrian finished. "Yes, I could change you. Yes, that power exists, but power does not equal permission. I gave you my word, you are here to pretend, nothing more. The choice to remain human will always be yours." Alina exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders bit by bit. "Thank you," she murmured. I don't know what I want for my future yet, but I'd like the chance to decide it myself." He studied her closely, something warm and complicated settling behind his eyes. Most who stand where you stand beg for more power, more time, more life, he said softly. You ask only for the freedom to choose. For someone like me who has had everything but choice, it is a foreign kind of courage. She frowned slightly. You're a king, she said. You can do whatever you want. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. Can I? The old pacts say otherwise. My own people say otherwise. Even tonight I marry not because I desire it, but because they demand it. The peace between our kind and yours is fragile, built on fear and compromise. A king with no queen is a threat. A king with the wrong queen is a disaster. And a king with a human queen, Alina asked quietly, what does that make you? He held her gaze, the question hanging heavy between them. A danger, a miracle, a mistake, or, he paused as if the word cost him something. A turning point. Something about the way he said it, quiet, hopeful, terrified, made Alina's chest ache. For the first time, she felt the true weight he carried, not just as a legend or a monster in old stories, but as a person trying desperately not to break the world he was responsible for. A soft knock at a side door broke the moment. Two women entered, both pale but warm-eyed, dressed in simple dark gowns. They bowed to Adrian with a respect that held no fear, only familiarity. My king, the older one said, her voice gentle. The council will arrive within the hour. We came to help your bride prepare as you requested. Adrian nodded, then looked at Alina, that same flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, an emotion she never expected to see in a creature like him. If you still wish to go through with this, he said, his voice low, this is the last moment you may turn away without consequence. Once you wear that dress and stand beside me, there will be eyes on you that never forget. Alina looked at the dress again, then at the two waiting attendants, then back at the king who had paid her brother's bill and stood between her and Cassian's contempt without hesitation. Her life up until tonight had been built on surviving, not choosing, on doing what she had to, not what she wanted to. For once, the choice felt hers. I'm scared, she admitted, not bothering to pretend otherwise. But I've been scared of things my whole life. Rent, bills, illness, walking alone at night. This is a different kind of fear. It feels like standing at the edge of something big, and I think, she took a breath, I think I want to know who I am on the other side of it. Adrian's eyes softened, the faintest trace of pride appearing there. Then we walk together, he said, as partners in a lie the world will believe or in a truth it cannot yet understand. He stepped back, giving the attendant space. As they approached Alina with gentle hands and reassuring smiles, he turned to leave, but then paused, looking back at her one last time. Alina, he said quietly, whatever happens tonight, remember this, you are not here by accident. I chose you because you are kind in a world that has given you very little kindness in return. Do not let anyone, not even me, take that from you. Her throat tightened. And you, she asked softly, what do you get from all this, really, beyond peace and politics? He held her gaze, the answer unspoken but shining in his eyes like a secret he was only just beginning to understand himself. Perhaps, he said, voice barely above a whisper, I get to find out if even a king like me can be seen as something other than a monster by someone who has every reason to run. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, his crimson cloak sweeping over the polished floor, leaving the faint scent of cold air and old roses behind. The attendants guided Alina toward a side chamber where a tall mirror waited, candles surrounding it like silent witnesses. As the golden gown was lifted and the laces were loosened, she caught sight of her reflection, tired eyes, calloused hands, hair pulled back with a cheap elastic band. A girl who had spent her life in the background. The first brushstroke through her hair felt almost ceremonial. The dress settling over her shoulders felt like stepping into another version of herself, one she did not yet know how to name. With each careful adjustment, each pin, each ribbon, the Alina who counted tips and scrubbed plates seemed to blur, and another Alina slowly came into focus, a woman standing at the intersection of two worlds. When they finished, the older attendant stepped back, eyes shining a little. You look right, she said softly, not like someone playing dress-up, like someone who was always meant to be seen. Alina turned to the mirror fully, her breath catching. The girl staring back at her wore gold that caught the candlelight like captured sunrise. Her hair fell in soft waves, her eyes wide but steady. There was fear there, yes, but also a spark of something fiercer. Courage, maybe, or the beginning of it. For the first time in her life, she did not look ordinary. A bell rang in the distance, low, deep, and resonant, the council bell. The older attendant met her gaze in the mirror. "It is time, my lady," she said. "They are waiting for their queen." Alina's heart pounded, each beat echoing the bell's toll. Somewhere beyond these walls, Adrian stood alone before an ancient council that doubted him, before nobles who whispered about monsters and power and blood. Soon, she would walk out there and take her place beside him, not just as his fake bride, but as the living proof of his most dangerous choice. She drew in a shaky breath, fingers brushing the fabric at her waist, feeling its weight, its promise, its risk. And just as she took her first step toward the door, ready to face the hall and whatever waited there, a whisper brushed against her ear. So soft she couldn't tell if it came from the walls, her memories, or something far older. "Careful, little queen," it breathed. "In this palace, some lies become truer than vows and some hearts pay the price." Alina froze, her hand on the doorknob, chills racing down her spine. Because she knew, with sudden, terrifying clarity, the most dangerous thing that could happen tonight was not that the council would reject her. It was that she might start wanting this lie to be real. They say some nights don't end when the sun rises. They stay with you, echoing in every choice you make after. As the council bell's final note faded into the stone, Alina stood at the edge of a doorway and understood. Whatever she did next would follow her for the rest of her life. And maybe for the rest of his. The great hall was transformed when she stepped into it. Candles lined every arch, every balcony, their flames trembling in perfect rows like an audience holding its breath. Long tables covered in dark velvet were arranged in a crescent, filled with silent figures dressed in deep reds, blacks, and silvers. Their eyes glowed faintly in the candlelight, some gold, some crimson, some the color of cold steel. Above, the painted ceiling seemed to lean closer, stars watching through centuries of dust. At the center of it all, on a raised dais, stood Adrian. He wore black embroidered with the same deep gold that shimmered on her gown, a thin crown resting against his pale hair. The shadows clung to him like a familiar cloak, but something about him looked bare, vulnerable almost. As if beneath all the finery and titles, he stood alone, waiting to see if the world he ruled would turn on him. When he saw her, the hall faded for an instant. His eyes widened, then softened just slightly, but enough for her to see it. Surprise, admiration, and something softer she didn't dare name yet. He took a step forward, and in the heavy silence of the room, that single movement sounded as loud as a declaration. Whispers rippled through the gathered nobles, the sound like paper tearing. Human, mortal, reckless, bold. The words brushed against Alina's skin like cold wind, but she kept walking, her steps steady, the hem of her dress whispering over the stone. Halfway down the aisle, doubt hit her like a wave. What was she doing here? She was just a girl who carried plates and refilled coffee. She had no crown, no lineage, no legacy. Every gaze felt like a test she was already failing. But then she saw it again, that tiny, almost invisible tension in Adrian's jaw. The way his hands were perfectly still, as if he were holding himself together by sheer will. He had stood between her and Cashin's cruelty. He had paid her brother's bill. He had given her a choice when the whole world had always treated her like she had none. So she did the one simple, defiant thing she could. She lifted her chin and walked like she belonged. When she reached the dais, Adrian stepped down one step to meet her, bringing them almost eye to eye. Up close, she could see the faint shadows under his eyes like he hadn't truly rested in years. Yet when he looked at her now, something in that tiredness eased. "Oh, you came," he murmured, so only she could hear. She almost laughed at the echo of his first words at the door. "You keep saying that like I'm the one performing a miracle," she whispered back. "You're the vampire king standing in front of a council with a human on his arm. Seems like you're the brave one." His lips curved in the smallest, most honest smile she had seen on him yet. "We share the risk," he said softly. If I am brave, it is because you are here. He offered his arm, and this time she took it willingly. His skin was still winter cold, but his presence felt oddly steadying, like the solid trunk of a tree in a storm. Together, they turned to face the council. At the center table sat 7 figures, older than the others, their expressions carefully carved into masks of neutrality. Alina felt their scrutiny like heat on her skin. Lord Cashin sat among them, his smirk gone now, replaced by a cool, sharp interest. One of the elders, a woman with silver hair braided into a crown and eyes like polished amber, rose slowly. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. Adrian, king of the Night Court, she said, you stand here to fulfill the ancient pact. By taking a bride, you promise stability. By sharing your throne, you promise balance. But tonight you bring us a human. The word dropped into the silence like a stone. Do you defy our tradition, she continued, or do you seek to reshape it? Every gaze in the hall tightened on them. Alina felt Adrian's arm tense beneath her hand, then slowly relax as he straightened, drawing himself up to his full, unignorable height. I seek, Adrian said clearly, to heal it. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The silver-haired elder lifted a hand, silencing them without looking away from him. Explain, she said. Adrian's voice was calm, but Alina could hear the emotion under it, the quiet, careful fire. For centuries, we have ruled from the shadows, he said. We have watched humans fear us, and we have used that fear to keep peace. But fear is a brittle foundation. It cracks, it shatters, it leaves wounds that never fully close. His eyes moved briefly over the hall, then returned to the council. You say I must marry for stability, that my queen must be powerful, ancient, of noble blood. He tilted his head slightly. Tell me, has our noble blood ever taught us kindness? Has our age ever taught us compassion? We have power, but we have grown afraid of softness, of humility, of seeing ourselves through the eyes of those we quietly rule. The word struck something deep in Alina. This was not a speech of rebellion. It was a confession from someone who knew exactly what he was. Tonight, Adrian went on, I choose a bride who understands the cost of survival, who has known hunger, fear, and smallness and chosen kindness despite them. A human who will not be blinded by our traditions because they were never hers. I choose her not in spite of her humanity, but because of it. Cashin rose half an inch from his chair, eyes flashing. And what happens, he cut in, when she grows old, when she dies and leaves your throne vulnerable? Will you take another temporary queen and another? Or will you finally do what you were born to do and choose one of our own? Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Alina felt something rise inside her. A quiet, steady courage she didn't know she had been building with every step of this night. She let go of his arm and stepped forward, just enough to make the entire hall realize she was not a silent ornament. Her voice was soft when she spoke, but the silence magnified it until every word felt sharp and clear. May I speak? She asked, looking at the silver-haired elder rather than at Cashin. The elder studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. You may. Alina took a slow breath. Her heart hammered, but she held onto the memory of the diner, of small kindnesses, of quiet decisions to do the right thing even when no one cared. Those moments had been hers. This one would be too. You're all worried about power, she began. About time, about how long I'll last. I understand that. I'm human, I break, I get sick, I die. That scares you. She paused, then added, it scares me too. No one moved, even the candles seemed to lean closer. But where I come from, she continued, the people I admire most aren't the ones who live the longest. They're the ones who use the time they have to make someone else's life easier, even if just a little. The nurse who stays late, the neighbor who shares what little food they have, the stranger who pays a bill they didn't have to pay. Her gaze flicked to Adrian for a heartbeat, then back to the council. You say I bring no alliance, she said quietly. You're wrong. I bring the alliance of every human who has ever dreamed of someone with power choosing kindness instead of fear, of a ruler who sees them as more than a threat or a resource. If your king marries one of you, nothing changes. If he marries one of us, maybe we all learn to stop being so afraid. A different kind of murmur rose now, not angry, not mocking, curious, uneasy, thoughtful. Akashin's eyes narrowed. Pretty words, he said, but words don't stop wars. When her heart stops beating, what will you have left, my king? Regret. Alina turned to him, her gaze steady. Or a better kingdom, she replied softly. One that remembers for generations that for a little while its queen was human, that your all-powerful king chose love that could end over power that never would. At the word love, something stuttered in the air. She hadn't meant to say it. The hall seemed to freeze. Her cheeks heated, but she didn't take it back. Love hadn't fully formed between them yet, not the way stories told it, but there was the beginning of something here. Respect, gentleness, the courage to truly see each other. If that wasn't the root of love, what was? Adrian was looking at her now with an expression so raw it made her chest ache. Not ownership, not triumph, gratitude, wonder, and beneath it a question. The silver-haired elder studied them both, her amber eyes narrowing, then softening just a fraction. Human girl, she said, do you understand what it would mean to stand at his side? The danger, the scrutiny, the loneliness of being between two worlds, never fully one, never fully the other. Yes, Alina said, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. I've been between worlds my whole life, poor but working among people who had more, human but now standing in a hall of immortals. I know what it feels like to not fit anywhere. I also know what it's like to create belonging out of nothing. I can do it again. The elder turned to Adrian. And you, Adrian, do you take this risk not as a performance but as a choice? Is this a game to buy time, or is this truly your bride? This was the moment. The lie they had agreed on at the diner hovered between them like a veil. One night, pretend, smile, bow, walk away richer, safer, unchanged. He could say it was strategy. He could tell them it was symbolic. He could pull back, call her a necessary illusion, and they would accept it. He would keep his crown, she would keep her life. Instead, Adrian looked at Alina, and everything else in the room fell away. In the beginning, he said, voice low but carrying, it was a bargain. I will not lie, I needed someone kind who did not fear me, someone to stand by my side for a night and make a lie look like truth. He took a breath, the next words coming slower, deeper. But then she spoke to me as if I were not a king or a monster. She challenged me when I tried to hide her. She defended me to myself. She walked into this hall knowing you might hate her and still chose to be kind. His gaze never left hers. If a king is measured by the courage of the one who chooses to stand beside him, then I have been given more than I deserve. His voice softened further, almost breaking. So no, this is not just strategy anymore. If she will have me, this is truly my bride. The words found their way into every corner of the hall. Alina felt something inside her crack open at his admission. All the nights she had gone unnoticed, all the times she had been treated as replaceable, all the quiet heartbreak of being invisible, suddenly there was this. A king standing before his entire world, saying that her kindness had changed him. He turned slightly, now speaking not just as king, but as a man. Alina, he said, voice dropping to something only half the hall could hear, though surely everyone leaned in to catch it. When I came to your diner, I thought I was buying a lie to keep my throne, but you have given me something I did not expect, truth. You have shown me that humility is not weakness, that gentleness is not fragility, that a human heart can be stronger than any immortal power. He swallowed, vulnerable in a way that made her eyes sting. I asked you to be my bride for one night. Now, in front of all who doubt us, I ask you something else. His eyes searched hers, naked with hope and fear. Will you stay not as a symbol but as my queen, knowing I am not easy, knowing the nights will be long, knowing the danger? Will you share whatever time is given to us, however short, however long, and help me rule with the kindness that comes so naturally to you? The time slowed. She saw in a rush the diner, the hospital, her brother's tired smile, the bus stop in the rain, the palace doors opening. His hand always hovering just close enough to defend but never close enough to trap. His loneliness worn like a second crown. She could say no. She could walk away with a story no one would believe and a bank account that might finally breathe. She could go back to a life she understood, safe in its smallness, untouched by ancient councils and impossible love. Or she could step into the unknown, holding the hand of a man who had more power than anyone she'd ever met, and had chosen in this moment to bend that power into something gentle, something brave. Her fear was real, but so was the way her heart steadied when he looked at her as if she mattered in a way no one ever had. Slowly, Alina lifted her hand and placed it in his. Yes, she said, and the word felt like jumping and landing at the same time. I'll stay, not because of the crown or the palace or the power. I'll stay because for the first time, someone with everything to lose is willing to choose kindness with me, and I don't want you to do that alone. The hall exhaled in a wave of shock, disbelief, anger, awe. Akashin's chair scraped back as he rose fully, fury flashing across his face. This is madness, he shouted. You would risk our future on a fragile mortal. The silver-haired elder slammed her hand once on the table, the sound cracking across the hall like lightning. Cashin fell silent mid-word. Enough, she said, her voice brooking no argument. She turned her gaze to Alina and Adrian, then closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to some memory only she could hear. When I was young, she said slowly, our kind nearly plunged this world into endless war, not because we were weak, but because we believed ourselves invincible. It was a human, a single, ordinary human who chose mercy instead of revenge and showed us another way. We built these packs on that moment. Her eyes opened, bright and clear. We have forgotten our own origin. She looked at Alina, and for the first time there was something like respect in her gaze. Perhaps, she murmured, it is time we remembered. The elder turned to the council. Raise your hands if you oppose this union. Cashin's hand shot up immediately. Two others hesitated, then followed, their eyes full of fear, not hatred. Across the tables, some shifted uncomfortably. Many did not move at all. And those in favor, the elder asked. Slowly, so slowly, Alina's heart hurt. Hands began to rise, not in a wave, not in a show of unity, but one by one. Uncertain, reluctant, brave, a few, then more, then more. Not everyone, but enough. The elder nodded once. Then it is decided, she said. The council does not stand in opposition. The king may take his human bride. Cashin's face twisted, but he did not speak. Not now, not when the room had spoken against him. The battle was not over, that much was clear in his eyes, but tonight at least he had lost. Adrian let out a breath Alina hadn't realized he'd been holding. He turned back to her, his voice dropping into something intimate amid the public ceremony. Are you certain? He whispered, even now giving her one last exit. Alina smiled, a small, steady curve that came from a place deep inside her she had never touched before. No, she admitted, but I'm brave enough to find out. A soft, disbelieving laugh escaped him, half relief, half wonder. Then let us be uncertain together, he murmured. The elder spoke the old words of union, binding not in chains but in promises, promises to protect, to listen, to lead with more than fear. Adrian repeated them, his voice clear and unwavering. When it was Alina's turn, her voice shook once, then found its strength. The last vow hung between them. I will stand beside you, she said, eyes locked on his, not as your shadow, not as your shield, but as your equal. I will remind you of the human heart you are trying to protect, even when you forget. And I will let you remind me that even in the darkest places, there is room for light. When it was done, there was a beat of silence, long and fragile. Then, from somewhere at the back of the hall, a single pair of hands began to clap. Others joined slowly, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction. It was not a roar of approval, it was not total acceptance, but it was something more powerful, the beginning of a choice to try. Adrian lifted her hand and pressed his lips gently to her knuckles, not as a claim of ownership, but as a quiet thank you the whole room could see. His eyes shone, the ancient, lonely weight in them softened by a new, glimmering thing. A hope. Later, when the formalities faded and the hall hummed with uneasy conversation, they stood together on a balcony overlooking the mist-covered city. The night air was cold, but the candles behind them cast a soft warmth across the stone. Alina leaned on the railing, looking down at the far-off streets where buses rolled and diners glowed with neon. Two worlds, side by side, finally visible to each other. "Do you regret it?" Adrian asked quietly, standing just close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She thought about the question carefully. "No," she said. "I'm terrified, overwhelmed, completely out of my depth, but I don't regret it." He huffed a soft breath that might have been a laugh. "That is a comfort," he said. "I have made many decisions in my long life. This is the first that feels both utterly reckless and completely right." She turned to look at him. "Do you regret choosing me?" she asked. He met her gaze without hesitation. "Not for a single heartbeat," he said. "You walked into my palace to play my bride. Somehow, in less than one night, you became my compass." Her throat grew tight. "That's a lot of pressure for a girl who used to burn toast in a diner," she whispered. "Then we will learn together," he replied gently. "How to be a king who listens, how to be a queen who speaks, how to build a peace that does not rely on fear." They stood in a companionable silence for a while. Down below, a faint hint of dawn brushed the horizon, soft and pale. "Alina," he said after a long pause, voice softer than the breeze, "I know your life is still there, your brother, your world. I will not cage you here. Tomorrow, today, you can go to him. You can move between your world and mine as you choose. This crown is not a prison unless you let it be." She looked back at the city, then at him. "You really mean that?" she asked. "I can still be me." "I am counting on it," he said simply. "It is you I chose, not a role." Tears pricked her eyes, unexpected and hot. She blinked them away, but one slipped free. Without thinking, he reached up, his cold thumb catching it gently before it fell. "I have outlived empires," he murmured, "seen cities rise and crumble. Yet this," his hand brushing her cheek so carefully, reverently, "this feels more important than any of it." She caught his hand in hers, holding it against her cheek for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Then let's make it matter," she said. "Let's prove that kindness can hold more weight than fear." Dawn's first light finally broke over the distant hills, brushing the sky with rose and gold. Somewhere behind them, the palace hummed with uncertainty and whispered opinions. There would be challenges, resistance, plots in shadowed corridors, hard conversations, lonely nights. But on that balcony, with the new day rising and his hand in hers, the weight of all that felt unbearable. "Adrian," she said softly. "Oh, yes." "I know tonight started as a lie," she said. "But when you asked me, really asked me to stay, that was the first time in a long time I felt truly chosen. Not for what I could do, just for who I am. I want you to know whatever happens from here, I won't forget that." Something in his expression broke open completely at her words. "Then we share this," he said, "because tonight, for the first time in a very long time, I felt forgiven, not by the council, by myself." They stood together until the sky brightened and the night fully loosened its hold. A human girl from a diner, a vampire king who had spent centuries alone at the top of a world built on fear. The poor waitress who had agreed to be a fake bride for one night had become a queen by morning, not because of the crown on her head, but because she had chosen to stand beside a monster and seen the man instead. And as the first true sunlight touched the palace stones, not burning but warming, and the city awakened below them, one quiet, impossible truth settled between them like a vow unspoken. Sometimes the bravest kind of power isn't the kind that conquers. It's the kind that reaches out a hand across everything that divides us and says, "I see you, I choose you, let's build something kinder together."